Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about I've just gone over the issue, or over the essay rather, and the issues raised by Jacob Savage and his take on what was, journalism, screenwriting, that sort of stuff in the infotainment industry, and his mapping out of how white men, or straight white men in particular, were unincluded, disincluded, were not even given jobs, and where the new hires coming in were overwhelmingly given to so-called minorities, the proverbial black, lesbian, and so on. One of the points he raises, which is universally known, is that involves a fairly substantial decline in quality and standards. In order to hire unqualified people, you have to lower the standards, and when you're preferring the less qualified person over the higher qualified person, then obviously you're on a downhill slant there, and it isn't going to lead to a good place. And nobody needed to be told that, or it was obvious from day one, and something that I saw as a kid. But the idea that Mr. Savage puts forward is that the baby boomer people were immune from it, and they were the older white men were administering the demise of younger white men by preventing them from being hired or promoted or rewarded or whatever. So, and now I think the infotainment industry may have been somewhat unique, but not completely. But I just want to put this to rest, and I mentioned this in another video I recently did. This is simply not true. There's plenty of boomer men, probably a little bit coming after the boomer period, but say people like myself, sort of coming at either the tail end of the baby boomer phase, or coming a year or two into the next sort of category there. This has been going on for a long time. It's just picked up pace, and it's become more widespread and more vicious, but it's been going on for quite a while. One of the things that I thought I was noticing as a younger sort of guy coming through the ranks was that I believe the quality of the management, the people getting appointed to management positions, was declining. That more and more people were being, this was my view at the time, were being appointed on the basis that they were part of a crony network, or they were because the banks and the various investment firms were playing a bigger role in business at the time, that they were insisting their own nominees had to be given the jobs or had to be on the board of directors. So there was a shift already away from merit to people that you could control, and controlling markets and outcomes in the back room, and therefore reducing the need for capable, high quality people that could win in a competitive market environment. And the idea was to reduce the market competition aspect of things, of every Western economy, and increasingly move towards predictable, managed outcomes. And once you're doing that, it was a backroom string pulling exercise rather than having frontline top quality people. And that, I think that change was already underway, and this facilitated, I think this opened the door to this idea of affirmative action hiring, because if the quality of people you have matters less and less, then who cares if you've got an illiterate black lesbian as the CEO? It doesn't matter at this point, given that the real decisions are made in the back room. And you can see this even in the body politic, where the globalists are making all the big decisions for the Western world, and you can look at the decline and see noticeable decline in the quality of people in Parliament. So you look at the Labor Party people, Jess Phillips and Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper and so on. These people would be lucky to get the job as a junior level administration clerk in some outer suburban accounting practice. I mean, that's the level of people you're talking about. And here they are now, the most ostensibly the most senior people in the British government, or AOC, and people like that in the American think, the whole parliamentary system and the people that are in it has been degraded because they don't have to they're not sovereign governments anymore. They're just fetch and carry flunkies working for the globalists, as most people in the business sector are fetch and carry flunkies also working for the globalists. And so the wider doors were already open to affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion, and race, gender quota hiring because quality of the people mattered less and less. Now, the quality of the people actually did still matter, and still matters today, which is why hardly anything works and why everything seems to be fucked up. It's because we've got a lot of low quality DEI hires that are running around in these roles, and they've always would have been in those roles. But I want to go back even further here, and I've mentioned this a number of times before about the number of people or the number of changes already underway. It was a slow motion train wreck, but it was already beginning to be, the pieces were already being put in place. Even when I was in high school and senior high school, so we're talking going into the late 70s here. But the this idea of equity and equality and equal outcomes and gender issues was very much part of the conversation, certainly amongst trade unions, and the teachers' trade union was a very powerful trade union then, as it is today. And as I've mentioned in other videos, I got detention one day. In those days, you get detention for not wearing the school badge in the right place. I mean, that's how much things have changed. So I got detention, and it was a hot day, so the teachers were meeting in the teachers' common room, I think it was called, and all the windows and doors were open, and the class that had to do the detention in was right next to the door of that teacher's room, and they were debating whether or not they would have equity programs in the education, in the school, or whether or not they would maintain the merit-based program. Now, the arguments and the speeches were quite impassioned, and I heard them. And interestingly, it was the Jewish teachers that argued for, and there was 2 or 3 Jewish teachers. Not that I realised they were Jewish at the time or even thought about it, but looking back, they were the ones that were arguing for equity. And particularly, there were others, but they're particularly doing this. There was a lesbian librarian, she was arguing for equity. And nonetheless, the equity program went the merit program went that, all exams should be meritorious. Whoever comes first, and whoever comes last, and that's it. And there were things like kids that are struggling should have the option of going to remedial classes to help them. But the equity crowd argued opposite. They said, look, if we leave it to merit, straight white male boys will come first. They didn't say straight white male. The school was 99.99% white. So, in fact, there was one swarthy kid who was half Maori or something like that, I think he was, and that was the closest to non-white that you would get. But the argument they put forward, the equity crowd, was that if we leave it to merit, boys will come first in everything, and that's not fair. We've got to in order to create an equitable society, we have to have equal numbers of boys and girls coming first in the subject. Only that will create equity. And until we have equity, then we have a capitalist autocracy, and how will we ever have fairness? So this was an argument, and I think I was 15 at the time, 14, 15, something like that, and wasn't necessarily paying a lot of attention. But given again that they were so impassioned, I kind of memorized it and stored it away for future reference. And But even at that age, I was sort of concerned, well, how do you create equity if it's not by merit? I mean, isn't merit a form of equity? Whoever works the hardest and is the smartest, they do well. And if then isn't that okay? Now, there are all sorts of arguments that people who came from disadvantaged backgrounds, which is a bit rich in a school like that, by the way, but people who came from disadvantaged backgrounds, shouldn't they get special dispensations? Well, yeah, but the dispensation should be they get more help, not that you give them some artificial bullshit grade and then pretend that they did well when they didn't. Like kids that are doing it tough, but why not offer free remedial classes and things like, why not do that to help them get across the line rather than just say, we'll give you a bonus 50 points just because we say you're disadvantaged or you're a oppressed minority. Even as a kid, that struck me as bullshit to do that. But the argument, and this is the argument that won, was that they said, well, girls must come first in 50% of the subjects. They also said that disadvantaged minorities, but in a school, upper middle class, all white school like that, they didn't really have the minorities to play with. So it was only the gender card, not the race card, that they could play in this case. So they said the girls should come first in 50% of the subjects, and the other 50%, rather than allocate to boys, they said, well, we'll leave that as a merit-based subjects, but this has to be, girls have to come first. And they did that just by giving all girls a 50 points. You got 50 points on top of whatever your mark was or your grade was. Was it 25? Anyway, whatever it was, so that meant that every girl passed, those subjects, and girls came first in those subjects from then on. Boys just weren't allowed to come first, regardless of how well they did in the exam. Anyway, so this was going on again in the late 1970s, very much the talk of the trade unions and other. And I remember articles in some of the leftist newspapers and media outlets at the time were also hinting and looking at this. Well, how to create equity, and so that was already a subject back then. Now, as I mentioned again in other videos, even when I was like 20, 21 years old, and I got given a temporary gig to cover for someone on annual vacation to do the cadet trainees, to mark their exams and to hand out the exams and so on. It was really a clerical role and nothing more than that. But I was told that I had to pass all the girls in the thing, whether they passed the test or not, whether they handed in their paper or not, whether they even bothered to turn up on the day. It didn't matter. I had to pass all of them. I was given a direct instruction to do it. And when I saw, I was quite perplexed by the absurdity of the order. And I was told in no uncertain terms, you'll be out of the job, buddy. Do what the fuck you're told, or you'll be looking for another job. We'll get someone who will do it. And this was part of, I think, what happened to the baby boomer managers. And there's a lot of guys I know, they're not in baby boomer age anymore, or they're not in the baby boomer cohort, but guys that I know where they're just told, they get a call from HR saying, you've got too many straight white males on your team. Now they're not told you must fire the straight white males, but they're told you've got a head count of, I'll use round numbers. So you've got a head count of 100, and you've got 10 too many straight white males, or 10. You need 10 more diversity hires. And we're not going to let you hire any more than 100. So the guy's got no choice. He's got to get rid of 10 straight white males, or 10 white people, straight white males in this case, because they always seem to be the ones that there's too many of, no matter how you slice and dice it. And so they're told just to do it. And you have to hire 10, the proverbial 10 black lesbians. You got to hire them, but you've got to get rid of 10 straight white males to do it. And you can't get rid of the gay white male. Can't get rid of the white lesbian. Can't get rid of the the brown woman, or so. He can only get rid. Now, he hasn't been told directly, but that's what he's got to do. And in some cases, some of them push back and say, hey, there aren't any freeloaders or amongst the straight white males, there aren't any freeloaders or incompetent people on my team. So I can't really get rid of anybody. I can get rid of some of these black lesbians. That's not a problem. No. Only straight white. So he's got a quota that he's got to meet. And if he doesn't meet it, he's in trouble. So the guy pushes back on HR. Next thing you know, he's got the CEO on the phone talking to him, say, listen, Billy Bob, I understand that you're refusing. I understand that you're a racist, fucking fascist Nazi, not wanting to get. No, I'm not. I promise, I'm not a racist. And he's told, well, look, you'll be out of a job if you don't. Your performance is being measured by how many black lesbians you got on your team. If you don't have enough of them, you'll be out of a job. And it'll be. I'll put it around town that you're a racist and a misogynist, and you'll never work in this town again. Now, for a well-paying, prestigious job, and they got big mortgages and kids in private school, all that sort of stuff. You can't afford that. That you'd be ruined. Even if you toughed it out, you'd still have to go through a difficult 12 months of making, explaining things away, begging and groveling to get another job. So it's just no point. And if they tell you to get rid of the straight white males, you do it. And there's a lot of guys I know who were in and are in that position. So they're being told to get rid of these people. Now, this has been going on for again. I was encountering this in the 1980s. When I first got my first sort of VP gig, I was still quite a young guy, and every time, I had the meeting with the board of directors because the CEO was also a director, so I was the guy who then had to report to the board. So I had to go to these meetings, and they would beat me up every fucking time over not having enough diversity, and this was back then. And the main push that they had was there was an issue of trying to show off their credentials for I care and I'm not racist, that sort of thing. But it was also they thought they could get high quality people for cheaper, and so they had this sort of strange view in their heads that you could get. The rocket, the 5 million IQ rocket scientist from some third world country that would work for a bowl of rice and a pat on the back. They had this, and this comes back again to the quality of management. Straight white male management was starting to be put in. They were putting people in who were amenable, who had no real, they hadn't worked their way up. They hadn't had to perform and achieve and accomplish and build and create in order to get the job. I had. So I saw the world from a very different perspective. They saw the world from one of entitlement and prestige and inheriting money. And, they had a very different view of how the world worked. So they would tend to see, well, can't we hire those cheap brown people? Why not? And let's save some money. And I've read somewhere that they're all geniuses. Yeah, sure they are. So this has been going on for quite some time, and in high technology business, the IT industry was one of the industries that was ruthlessly targeted by the woke set, and I found pretty early on wherever there was Jewish money or Jewish managers, they were particularly fixated with hiring minorities and so on. But they always again had the back room stitched up to where the business would come from, and so well, we don't need people who are any good, so we can create this window dressing of equity and social engineer this equity and so on. But I just wanted to highlight this has been around for a long time, and straight white male managers or general managers, vice presidents and so on, CEOs even, that wouldn't go along with this or were dragging their feet on. I didn't really agree with it and reluctantly sort of, okay, I'll hire a black lesbian too if you want me to. They would find themselves out of a job, and there were other inducements as well. The big financial firms, the BlackRocks and so on. They controlled the share price. They could make the share price go up or down whenever they wanted to on any publicly traded shares. So they could say to a CEO saying, look, we want 50% black lesbians on your staff, on your payroll, your employees. And if you do that, if you do that, we'll walk the share price up to $50 a share. And they can do it. They're big, the BlackRocks and the Vanguard states, they're big enough to do this. We'll walk the share price up to $50 a share, and we'll just have your compensation package will say that you get a $25 million bonus if the share price hits $50. And if you do what we want, hiring all these black lesbians, we'll make sure the share price hits $50. We'll walk it up to $50, which will trigger your gazillion dollar compensation package. Now, a lot of people say, well, okay, all right, I fire a couple of hundred straight white males, or don't hire a couple of hundred straight, hire black lesbians instead, and I get $25 million in my back. Who cares? Well, why not? I mean, why should I care about them? Why don't I look out for myself? So these things have been going on as well. So the transition went that there was a lot of cronyism with competence following World War II. People that knew each other from the army and the armed services and that sort of thing. As that began to dissipate, which it was doing by the 70s, then merit on its own was it. But it was a lot of spontaneous collaboration went on. All the places where I first started working, in the early 80s and everything, I was working with people. No one knew anybody. No one knew about it. Everybody was focused on what are the goals, what are the objectives, how are we going to get this done. And there was, people were collaborating and being loyal to each other, but it was on the basis of competence. It was collaboration of competence. If somebody wasn't competent and couldn't keep up, they were put to one side. But if they were competent and they could keep up, it was a collaboration of competence, which worked very well. Hugely dynamic time to be alive, and it was during at the time when I was sort of entering the corporate, if you like, workforce. But that created a situation where executive management began to be appointed by big moneyed interests, and that in turn is what opened the door to, I believe, the affirmative action, diversity, inclusion, race, gender, hiring, and so on. It has led to us today where we're in the crony economy, where very little of the economy is actually competitive anymore. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.